Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Thursday Live. Let me just make sure that everything is in order. Yeah, I think we are good. Listen, today I wanted to talk about something. It's an old topic, but it's something that keeps coming up again and again and again and again. So this is the difference. So it's really to do with why we can't trust nutrition science as a whole, right? And it's the chain of thought that sparked this conversation is this discussion that I had again with my one of my vegan trolls, although he insists he's not a vegan. I don't care if you're a vegan or not. I don't care what you eat. I don't care what you don't eat. If you bring up these arguments, you've clearly been hijacked by the vegan agenda. So it's up to you, man. So it's a long discussion around RRs and so on. But I just wanted to point out this content, this comment, right? So he says, my only claim against the paper is that a hazard ratio of 2 is required to establish meaningful correlation, which is true when we look at these big population studies. This is not my work. This is the work of John Ioannidis, which I will cite in a second. He says, I'm embarrassing myself, fine, whatever. A hazard ratio of 2 means 100% chance of different outcomes, which is correct, but we're talking about relative risk, right? And it does not even the realm of language of epidemiology at this point. Who needs statistics if there's a guarantee? So there's a very, very, very deep misunderstanding of what's going on. He doesn't understand the difference between absolute and relative risk, right? So just to clarify, what we're saying is that in order in these large population cohorts, so you have big, big pools of people. We're talking about UK Biobank data. We're talking about the NA Haynes data, people who've been followed and studied for many, many years, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions of people. You need to see a fairly significant difference between two different groups in order to posit some kind of change, right? So what would a fairly significant difference be? Well, the difference between, say, 1% and 2%. So if in group A, 1% of people are getting cancer, for example, or it will be a specific kind of cancer. 1% of people are getting colorectal cancer, and in group B, 1.1% of people are getting colorectal cancer. Is that big enough to posit a difference? Well, it depends on lots of other things. You can't say that. If it's a randomized control trial, in some cases it may be. They may be significant. But in this kind of observational data, it's probably meaningless. It's probably just background noise. And we can prove that through a variety of ways. So that's an RR of 1.1. Now, if it went up to 2, so if it went from 1% in group A to 2% in group B, that would be exactly what I'm saying, a hazard ratio of 2.0, 100% increase. Now, when you see a 100% increase, okay, maybe there's a signal. This is relative risk. So that's the difference between relative risk and absolute risk. If something goes from 0.1% of the population to 0.2% of the population, that's a huge increase. That's again an RR of 2, huge increase, but it's still only affecting 0.2% of the population. So how concerned should we be about it? Again, it depends on what the specific issue is. In some cases, it may be very concerning. We had this debate ad nauseum a few years ago during the pandemic times and so on, right? Now, the thing I want to talk about to really make this point hit home is the pyramid of information. So this is, many of you will have seen this before, right? So we talk about, as you get further up this pyramid, the quality of the evidence is considered higher, right? So in the very bottom of the pyramid, we have your background information, your opinion of experts, et cetera, et cetera. This doesn't count for anything. This is just the foundation upon which the pyramid is built, really. Then you have things like case studies, right? You have reports. So if you have a very odd case study, for example, there's a very famous case study that was written, I think, in the 1940s about a case of spontaneous remission of cancer, very rare case. Someone went, he was given like literally a couple months to live, and he came back the next year, and his doctors were like, what happened to you? Where's the cancer, right? That's a case study that got written up in the literature, a very interesting case study. Those are important, but they're fairly low quality because just one person, right? Above that, you have cohort studies. So most of the data that the vegans are citing are these cohort studies, mass populations of people. Group A ate more butter, Group B ate less butter, and the outcomes in Group A are slightly better. Again, think about that difference between relative risk and absolute risk. Usually we see it's not a very significant difference. So an RR of 1.1, 1.2 never really gets to even 1.4 in those kind of trials. If you look at headlines that say don't eat bacon or don't eat eggs and so on, look at the RRs, try and understand what's going on, and look at them before anything was corrected for. See the base data and see what they were working with, right? Because corrections, when people are correcting, they're correcting with a bias in mind. When they're making models with the bias is already in mind. So try and look at the data, and if the RR is less than 2.0, you can pretty much ignore it for these big things. Above that, you have randomized controlled trials. Above that, you have basically different kinds of filtered information, including systematic reviews at the very top, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this is based on the unfiltered information below. With that in mind, I just wanted to show one of the very interesting outcomes from nutritional epidemiology. And by the way, when we talk about nutritional science, it's pretty much all epidemiology, as we'll discuss in a second. So this one was really interesting. This is an article in The Atlantic from a couple of years ago, May 2023. I wrote a blog piece about it when it came out. You're welcome to check out my blog. This is my blog here. Ice cream is healthy according to science, which is really the outcome of this paper. Now, I in order to research that blog, I looked at a lot of these papers, and the interesting thing was you find that ice cream is actually more healthy than a lot of other things that they're trying to claim is healthy. The big thing was yogurt. You have all these data points where they're trying to prove that yogurt is healthy or low-fat yogurt is healthy, and they can't really prove it. People who eat low-fat yogurt, the outcome is more or less meh. But the thing that came up when they were looking at dairy products is the ice cream, the category that included frozen desserts, mostly ice cream, that came up as a big signal. The RR there was 1.23 or 1.24. It was much bigger than all of these other things that they were trying to prove to be healthy, low-fat things, right? And the thing about nutritional science is, you see, the group didn't like the ice cream finding. It seemed wrong, so they just didn't mention it. Now, if you're going to do science, you have to sort of publish your results, right? Science doesn't depend on finding the outcomes that you want to find, which is why I'm very suspicious of nutritional science overall. And of course, I'm not the only one. So if we look at this Ioannidis paper going back, this is a fantastic paper going back. I think it's 2009. What's the date on this? 2013. So implausible results in human nutrition research, right? I mean, there's just amazing stuff here, right? So what they're showing is that almost every single nutrient imaginable has peer-reviewed publications associated with almost every outcome, right? So eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you. Coffee or caffeine, soy, right? Many findings are entirely implausible. Relative risks that suggest we can halve the burden of cancer with just a couple of servings a day of a single nutrient still circulate widely in peer-reviewed journal. On the basis of dozens of randomized trials, single nutrients are unlikely to have a relative risk less than 0.9 for major clinical outcomes. In other words, they'll only, if the prevalence of cancer is 1.1 in a given population, it can only, using that, whatever it is, green tea or whatever your favorite superfood is, will only change it to 1.0. So a very small decrease in the actual incidence, not the risk, not the relative risk, not the hazard ratio, nothing like that, right? Most are greater than 0.95. 0.95 means it's pretty much just noise. There's nothing going on here, right? For overall mortality, relative risks are typically greater than 0.995, or if not entirely null. In other words, what he's saying is you look at the epidemiology and then you look at the randomized controlled trials that have been done on chocolate, green tea, your favorite superfood, name it here. Nothing panned out. It was all just background noise. Nothing actually worked for people, right? Then he goes on about how even the randomized trials or the semi-randomized trials are just not powered enough to determine anything, right? So I'll just end by quoting I'll go to the impact of this, right? So this sentence here, definitive solutions will not come from another million observational papers or a few small randomized trials. Randomized trials are needed mainly to inform the design of pivotal mega trials of comprehensive interventions, right? We should also continue to explore other aspects of food and nutrition, such as food security, sustainability, et cetera, right? So what's the upshot here, guys? The upshot is I just don't see the point in paying attention to these to this set of data. What is called nutrition science on the whole is just not a useful set of data because it's all informed by these big population trials with relatively low RRs, and therefore they're just not interesting. So what is interesting to me, I mean, again, what is interesting to anyone, I think, should be what are the foods upon which a given animal evolved to eat, right? And in the case of Homo sapiens, ourselves, humans, it seems clear that we evolved to eat a high-fat diet a very, very low carb diet. And not a zero carb diet, because some people were eating berries and tubers and honey seasonally, et cetera, but not all of them, right? And once you're doing that, once you sort of understand the ancestral principles upon which, I think those are not controversial. I think we can all agree on what humans were eating 100,000 years ago, with some slight variation. Once you use that as a starting point, you're going to be much more likely than if you believe that whatever, that green tea is a superfood and blueberries are a superfood and eggs are bad for you, and meat is bad for you, because of these really, really crappy studies that don't actually tell us that much. So that's some food for thought. Let me know what you think. Thanks, Garuda Legends, for saying hello. Thanks, Ganesh, for saying that that's informative. Thanks everyone who's commenting down below, letting me know what's going on. Let me know. I mean, when you read about a new superfood in the newspaper, what are your thoughts? Right? I'd love to know. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.